now that NHS staff have been told that they are transphobic if they don't want to share a bathroom with a transgender colleague. This is mandatory training that was introduced in August for NHS England employees. It also claimed that people rather than women or mothers become pregnant and take maternity leave. Another passage suggested that it's discriminatory for nurses or doctors to pray for unwell patients. I mean, it just makes me... my blood boils when I read this stuff as a woman. It really does. However, maybe some light at the end of the tunnel after a group of nurses who complained after being told they must share their changing rooms with a so-called trans colleague who they say made them feel extremely uncomfortable with the way that he behaved in those changing rooms. I've had a conversation with Health Secretary Wes Streeting, who has told them that sex is biological. So perhaps he might turn around and tell the NHS to take on board the same opinion. Let's speak now to Amy Gallagher, former NHS nurse and commentator at the New Culture Forum. Amy, great to have you on the programme. It alarms me that NHS, this is our National Health Service, everyone stand on your doorstep, clap your hands and bash your pans, doesn't seem to understand basic biology, doesn't seem to understand safeguarding of women, doesn't seem to understand who is able to give birth and who isn't, and is telling their staff they must share toilet facilities with trans colleagues. I mean, what's your reaction to this?
Well, the thing is, I mean, in April of this year, we had a new NHS constitution written, and in it, it was clearly stated that we, the NHS, are defining sex as biological sex. And it was made front page of the newspapers that we were going to return to common sense language. We were going to have single sex wards. We were going to have, we were going to call people women and men rather than pregnant people and so on. And of course, alongside that, we've had the CAS review, and the CAS review really pushed back a lot on gender ideology. It made it quite clear that we shouldn't be socially transitioning children, for example. So we've had all these kind of quite big momentous shifts within the NHS policies and constitutions. But what's happening is that those changes aren't being sort of filtered down, disseminated into the training. So within the NHS, we've still got around 10,000 equality and diversity roles. We're paying £500 million a year on EDI, equality, diversity and inclusion. And the trainings that they are producing still push gender ideology. And so there's a complete disconnect between the shifts that have happened in policy and the EDI within the NHS. And that's the problem here. And that is not being tackled by the government. And, you know, it does seem to me that Wes Streeting's very consistent on this issue. He's kind of firmed up the ban on puberty blockers. He's supporting the Darlington nurses, which is great, but it doesn't seem to me that Labour are really tackling this issue within NHS training, and that's where this problem is, and that's why it's still happening.
Apparently this document states that it's not acceptable asking whether trans staff can instead use gender-neutral or disabled toilets, that constitutes illegal harassment, saying that it's an individual's choice to use whichever facilities match how they identify. So this isn't even about someone who's transitioned. This is about someone saying, well, I identify as a woman, I'm going into the women's toilets. Frankly, I think this is unsafe. When you look at past reports, actually, of some pretty horrific incidents that have happened in hospitals, places where vulnerable people go in to get care. The last thing we need are men wandering into women's facilities in an area where, you know, care should be at the forefront of everybody's minds because they say that day that they're a woman.
Yeah, well, this is the case with the Darlington nurses who are suing the NHS in that they had a changing room that was for women, and they allowed, and the policy stated that anybody that just self-ID'd as a woman could access that changing room. So there is a male colleague on their ward who just says that he's a woman. Now, in his private life, he lives his life like a heterosexual man. He's in a relationship with a woman. He hasn't undergone any gender reassignment surgery. He just says that he's a woman. And yet, under their policy that's written for that ward, he is allowed to enter into their female changing room. So as I said, these policies that are being written for individual hospitals or individual wards go against the broader NHS constitution. So it puts nurses and healthcare workers in a very difficult and, as you say, unsafe position because they are now having to go for a legal battle. They're having problems with their other colleagues. You know, it's been very stressful for them. So we really need to sort this out because it's going to happen more and more where women are going to be put in this very difficult position where they don't know whether to speak up, they don't know whether to challenge the ideology. agree. They don't know whether they're supposed to put up with it. They actually just don't know what they're supposed to do. And when they do, there's often a backlash, and they're thinking, well, hang on, we've had all these changes. Aren't we supposed to be supported? So that's the issue here.
And, you know, reading this other bit where it says that it's going to be discriminatory for nurses or doctors to pray for unwell patients, I wonder how far that goes and who that applies to. Now, certainly if it was somebody who was coming along kneeling at a bedside and muttering incantations with their hands clasped next to someone who frankly didn't want that to happen, yeah, I can imagine why that might seem a bit inappropriate. But if it was to, let's say, consenting Christians, and I don't know if this does just apply to Christianity or all religions, whether it's to a Sikh patient and a Sikh doctor, a Muslim patient and a Muslim doctor. One would imagine actually it probably only applies to Christianity because these things normally do. What on earth is wrong with that?
Well, I mean, I think it's very interesting that they've put that into this training because I've worked in the NHS for 10 years and I've never seen that happen. You know, I actually, in my private life, I happen to be a Christian, but I've never prayed for a patient. I've never seen it happening. So I wonder what problem they're trying to solve here. And as you say, I do think some of these things are brought in to target a particular group. And I mean, there was a case once of a doctor who prayed with a patient, but as you say, it was done consensually, that he knew that the patient was a Christian. He knew that it would be helpful to her emotionally, psychologically, if they prayed together. And that's the only time when this kind of thing happens. So it feels to me like they're making a problem, maybe to balance, maybe to show that they're providing balance or something. But that problem just does not exist. I've never seen it.
Providing balance to what? I mean, like I said, it doesn't seem to me that, you know, any other religion gets attacked other than Christianity, where it's a free-for-all.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, it does seem to be that they feel comfortable targeting Christians, particularly in the NHS. There's been quite an uptake in discrimination towards Christians in the NHS. There was a case of a recent nurse who was bullied and discriminated and harassed just because she wore a cross, and that doesn't seem to happen to, you know, other people wearing other signs of other religions like the hijab or other things like that. So there is this real shift in bigotry actually towards Christians, and now unfortunately towards women who believe in biological sex. And it does seem to be that the NHS is now favouring trans people and other religions over these other groups. So EDI, you know, which is supposed to be about, you know, equality and everybody being treated equally, what it actually ends up doing is discriminating against certain groups. It does the complete opposite of what it's supposed to do, as does all of these often, you know, equality and diversity trainings.
I couldn't agree more. We need to get rid of it.